The rain fell hard that evening, drumming on the metal roof of the Ridgeway Community Hall. Inside, the flickering emergency lights cast long shadows on the faces of 60 strangers brought together by one shared goal: survival. Tensions were high. The smell of sweat, wet clothes, and fear clung to the air. Every person there had seen death. Real death. Not the kind whispered in stories or broadcast on news reports, but walking, groaning, ravenous corpses tearing through the living. For many, their entire lives had ended in the last 72 hours. At the front of the room stood Bryce Renner, a former firefighter who had become an unspoken leader through sheer willpower and quick decisions. His uniform was tattered, smeared with blood that wasn't his, and his eyes were lined with exhaustion. Still, people listened when he spoke. "We have to fortify this place," Bryce announced, voice rough but firm. "No one's coming to save us." That message on the radio? Old recording. "There's no shelter down south. It's gone." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, some cried quietly. Melissa, a sharp-eyed nurse in her 30s, stepped beside Bryce, holding a clipboard she found earlier in the admin office. "There's 60 of us," she said. "Including children, elderly, and people who are injured. We need food, water, sanitation. And above all, we need to stay calm. Panic gets us killed." A teen boy, Kyle, no older than 16, shouted from the back. "What about the things outside? They're already close. I saw them from the upstairs window. They're wandering into town. We don't have time to plan." Bryce looked at Kyle and nodded. "You're right. We're on borrowed time. Which is why we work in shifts. Half of U.S. board windows and doors. The other half sort out supplies. We rotate every hour. If we work fast, we can lock this place down by nightfall." A gruff man in a leather jacket, Harris, ex-military, stood up from the bench where he'd been cleaning a rifle. "We need a perimeter. That shed across the parking lot could work as a fallback point if we get overrun. Also, we should build a noise trap, something that'll distract them if they breach the fence." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "You expect them to breach the fence?" "I expect the worst," Harris said grimly. "Hope's great, but preparation's better." By sundown, the community hall transformed into a miniature fortress. Tables were flipped and nailed over windows. A chain of volunteers passed bottled water and canned goods from nearby stores. Kyle and a few other teens set up a lookout post on the roof using binoculars and a pair of walkie-talkies. Still, the silence outside was unnerving. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel like something was watching. Bryce stood on the entrance steps, scanning the horizon as dusk bled into darkness. Then, he saw them. Shadows. Dozens of them. Lurching silhouettes shambling down Main Street, arms hanging, heads twitching, jaws slack. The undead. Drawn by instinct, by noise, by the smell of life. "Contact north," Kyle whispered through the radio. 30, maybe 40 of them. Inside, the mood shifted. Doors were bolted. Lights were dimmed. Children were hushed. Everyone could feel it, the siege had begun. Downstairs, in a makeshift corner shelter where parents had laid sleeping bags and mats, a little girl named Lily clung to her mother's arm. "Mommy, are the monsters gonna eat us?" Her mother, eyes wide but trying to be brave, whispered, "Not if we're quiet, sweetheart. Not if we stay smart." Meanwhile, Bryce gathered his core team, Melissa, Harris, Kyle, and Nadia, a mechanical engineer who had been fixing the backup generator. "We hold the line tonight," Bryce said. "We rotate guards. No one opens the door unless I say so. If they break in, we fall back to the kitchen and exit through the fire escape. It's narrow, but we can block it behind us." Everyone nodded. Even Kyle, who tried to hide the tremor in his hands. Hours passed. The undead didn't charge, not yet. They circled, sniffed, growled in confusion. They knew something lived within these walls. Something they wanted. Then, in the still of night, a scream pierced the hall. A woman in the back corridor was yelling, clutching her arm. "He bit me! That man, he bit me!" Panic erupted. People backed away. The man in question, a dazed, blood-covered stranger who had slipped in with the last group, was foaming at the mouth. His eyes were turning gray. "Get him away from her!" Melissa shouted, already rushing to check the wound. "He's turning. He's already turning." Bryce shoved the man down, pinning him as he writhed like an animal. It hadn't even been one full day, and the infection was already inside. To be continued in Part 2. The hall was a pressure cooker, and now the lid had blown off. The infected man thrashed on the floor, snarling, limbs twitching violently. Bryce pressed his knee into the man's chest, straining to keep him down, but the strength of the newly turned was unlike anything human. Teeth snapped inches from Bryce's face. "Hold him!" Harris barked, sprinting over. He raised the butt of his rifle and slammed it down on the infected man's skull with a sickening crack. The body went limp. Still. Finally dead. Melissa turned back to the woman who had been bitten, Layla, a librarian with a soft voice and quiet demeanor. Her sleeve was soaked in blood. The bite was deep. "I'm sorry, Layla," Melissa said gently, wrapping a bandage around the wound. "But that bite, it means you're infected. You know that, don't you?" Layla stared blankly ahead. "I didn't even see him come in. He was just there. He looked like one of us." That was the real horror, he had looked normal. No one had noticed the infection until it was too late. "Everyone, back away," Bryce shouted, stepping into the center of the hall. "From now on, we screen every single person. No exceptions. Anyone who joins us goes through a full check, clothes, skin, everything. We can't afford another mistake like this." The crowd was rattled. Whispers of doubt spread like wildfire. "She should be locked up," someone said. "Put her out of her misery," another voice added. "We can't have her in here." Layla looked around at the people she had sheltered with for days, faces twisted by fear. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered. "If it happens, if I change, I give you permission. Just don't let me become one of them." Melissa reached out and squeezed her hand. "We'll figure something out." They moved Layla into a storage room with a mattress, food, and water. Nadia reinforced the door from the outside with a chain and padlock, just in case. A small glass pane allowed them to keep watch. "You're not alone," Melissa told her softly through the door. "We'll check on you every hour." But everyone knew what was coming. Meanwhile, up on the roof, Kyle and two others were still on watch. The horde had nearly doubled. Dozens of undead now crowded the parking lot, moaning and dragging themselves across broken pavement. "They're not leaving," Kyle said into the walkie-talkie. "Some of them, they're just staring at the building. Like they're waiting." "Waiting for what?" Bryce's voice crackled back. "I don't know, but one of them is different. Bigger. Taller. It's just standing there at the edge of the crowd, watching." Inside, Bryce's stomach twisted. That sounded too much like what Harris had described earlier, a variant, one of the evolved ones. Stronger, faster, more aware. "We may have less time than we thought," he muttered. Later that night, the storm returned. Thunder rumbled across the hills and rain drenched the roads. It masked the sound of the undead, until a sharp bang echoed through the hall. Boom. 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 It wasn't thunder. It was fists. Dozens of them. The barricades. Harris yelled, already running toward the front doors. "They're testing them. Looking for weak spots." People scrambled into action. Nadia and Bryce rushed to reinforce the main doors with steel bars and cabinets. Children were ushered into back rooms. Some prayed. Some sobbed. All knew the horde was now at their doorstep. Then, the scream came again, from the storage room. Bryce and Melissa raced to the door. Through the glass, Layla was convulsing. Her hands clawed at the walls. Her eyes had turned pale. She was gone. "We have to end it," Melissa whispered. Bryce nodded, raised his axe, and ended it with one clean strike through the glass. Silence followed. Heavy, crushing silence. But no one had time to grieve. From above, Kyle's panicked voice crackled over the radio. "They're moving. They're coming. That big one, it's leading them right to us." To be continued in Part 3. The pounding was no longer scattered. It was rhythmic. Coordinated. Calculated. Bryce stood frozen for a second, listening to the unnatural tempo coming from every wall of the community hall. "They're not just pushing anymore," he muttered. "They're testing us." On the roof, Kyle watched through rain-speckled binoculars as the massive figure, nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders like a bear and limbs that moved too smoothly, stood at the front of the horde. It didn't lurch or groan like the others. It pointed. "They're following its lead." Kyle radioed down. "That tall one, it's like their commander or something." Inside, Bryce grabbed the walkie and barked, "What's it doing now?" Kyle hesitated. It just smiled. Bryce swore under his breath. A loud crack rang out from the east wing. Nadia, who had been checking the building's structure earlier, sprinted toward the sound. A boarded-up window had finally given way, just one, but it was enough. The first zombie came crawling in. Then another. Then 5. "They're in," someone shouted. The survivors scrambled into defensive positions. Harris and Bryce met the first wave head-on, pushing them back with shovels and broken furniture. Melissa dragged a young woman to safety as Nadia grabbed a nail gun and started sealing off the door behind them. "Keep them contained," Harris yelled. "Don't let them spread." The hallway erupted into chaos, groaning bodies, screams, the wet smack of fists and feet meeting flesh. But even in the panic, something became horrifyingly clear. These zombies were faster. Smarter. Stronger. One of them ducked under a swing. Another grabbed a stick and used it to block a door from closing. The tall one wasn't just leading them, it had changed them. "Back! Fall back!" Bryce shouted, covered in blood and breathing hard. The group retreated to the main lobby, sealing off the wing with tables and a locked steel door. For now, they had cut off the infected. But the cost had been high. 3 people were bitten, including a man named Derek who had a newborn son in the sleeping area. "No. No, please," Derek sobbed as Melissa examined the bite on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "We'll give you time to say goodbye." Derek collapsed to his knees. Nearby, Lily, the little girl from earlier, stood with wide eyes, clutching her toy rabbit. "Are they going to get in?" she whispered. Bryce knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Not tonight. We won't let that happen." But Bryce knew it wasn't a promise he could keep. Not with that thing outside. Later that night, the group gathered what was left of their strength. The infected hallway was sealed, the injured were isolated, and the survivors finally had a moment to breathe. Nadia set up a small camera system using leftover security equipment. One of the feeds pointed directly at the eastern exit, the weak point. On the screen, the tall zombie stood in full view. Its skin was pale gray, stretched tight across its bones, but its movements were eerily human. It didn't moan. It didn't flinch in the rain. It just stared. And then it raised a hand and tapped the glass with a long, claw-like finger. Tap. 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 It was a message. "They're not going away," Harris growled. "And that one, it knows we're watching." Bryce looked around at the weary faces of the survivors. They were running low on food. Their weapons were makeshift. Their spirits were hanging by threads. "This place won't hold forever," he admitted. "We need to come up with an escape plan. We can't sit here and wait to be overrun." Nadia nodded. "There's a fuel station 2 miles west. If we can hotwire a bus or find trucks with enough gas." Melissa interrupted, eyes fixed on the security monitor. "That thing, it's gone." Everyone turned toward the screens. The tall zombie had vanished from the feed. Bryce's heart sank. "Check the west entrance. Now." Kyle's panicked voice came through the radio seconds later. "It's coming around. It's leading the rest to the other side. Everyone up. Move!" Bryce shouted. The survivors scrambled again, grabbing weapons, waking the children, dragging the wounded into safer areas. There would be no sleep tonight. The siege wasn't over. It had just begun. To be continued in Part 4. Let me know when you're ready for Part 4, or if you want a full overview of the upcoming story arc. The storm passed, but the true darkness had just begun. The power was flickering now, intermittent surges of light followed by stretches of blackness. The backup generator had taken damage during the fight. Every flicker reminded the survivors just how fragile their shelter was. Bryce, flashlight in hand, paced beside Harris near the west exit. The steel-reinforced door groaned under pressure. Something, or someone, was pushing against it. "Any way we can reinforce this more?" Bryce asked. Harris shook his head. "Unless you've got a welding torch and 10 feet of steel, we're holding it with duct tape and furniture legs." A harsh scraping sound came from outside, metal against metal. Melissa, watching the camera feeds with Nadia, froze. On screen, the tall zombie was dragging a metal street sign. It slammed at once into the door. Then again. Tap. Smash. Tap. Smash. "They're not just breaking in," Nadia whispered. "They're learning how to break in." Inside, tensions reached a boiling point. Derek, bitten and infected, was now pale and feverish. His infant son, Aaron, was kept close by his teen niece, Camila. The others had grown uneasy. They didn't trust that Derek hadn't already turned. "He needs to be put down before he turns," said Greg, a former cop whose patience had long since run out. "We're risking all our lives for one guy." Melissa stood in the way. "He's stable, for now. And he hasn't shown signs of aggression. That's what the last guy looked like before he ripped someone's throat out." Greg shouted. Camila, holding the baby, stepped forward. "You're not killing him. He's my family. We still have time." "Do we?" Greg challenged. Tensions erupted. Shouting, pushing. Harris had to fire a shot into the ceiling to restore silence. Bryce glared at everyone. "This is exactly what that thing out there wants. Us tearing each other apart. You want to kill each other? Or survive?" No one answered. That night, the power finally died. Everything plunged into darkness. No cameras. No lights. No noise, except the groans from outside. Bryce gathered his core group, Melissa, Nadia, Harris, and Kyle. "We're going to move people to the gymnasium in shifts. It's got stronger walls and fewer entrances. It'll be our fallback if the doors give in." Nadia added, "And tomorrow, we send out a recon team. I'll take 2 others, head west to the gas station, check for vehicles, supplies, anything." Melissa hesitated. "That means splitting our strength. What if they attack again tonight?" Bryce looked around. "They will." In the early hours, the assault began. This time, it wasn't mindless. They came in silence, almost coordinated. The tall zombie, a silhouette against the moon, used the sign to wedge the door, forcing it open inch by inch. The moans came only when the gap widened. Kyle fired the first shot, then another. "They're in." Front entrance breached. Greg, Melissa, and Camila led children and noncombatants toward the gymnasium while Harris and Bryce formed a line in the main hallway. Makeshift barricades were overturned. Zombies spilled in, dozens of them. In the chaos, a side door slammed open. A back window had been forced. Another breach. Nadia shouted, "They're flanking us." And then, the screams. Greg's team had been ambushed near the sleeping quarters. One of the kids was pulled back through the broken wall. Bryce tried to fight through the crowd, but it was too late. Fall back. Now, he ordered. Room by room, inch by inch, the survivors retreated to the gymnasium, barricading doors, sealing windows. Nadia had hotwired a few overhead lights using a car battery. For now, they had light. For now, they had walls. But their numbers were down to 47. They had lost 13 people in less than 30 minutes. Later, as silence returned, Melissa sat beside Camila, who held the baby with trembling hands. He doesn't have anyone left now, Camila whispered. Melissa looked away. Neither do a lot of us. Meanwhile, in the hallway just outside the gymnasium, a shadow moved. The tall zombie stood beyond the barricade, staring through the crack. It didn't attack. It just stood there, watching. Learning. Waiting. To be continued in part 5. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. It's only going to get more intense from here. The gymnasium stank of sweat, fear, and exhaustion. Rows of terrified survivors sat shoulder to shoulder, eyes wide, listening for every creak and thump beyond the barricaded walls. Children whimpered quietly. The injured moaned under their breath. The silence between them was heavier than the night itself. Bryce moved to the center of the group, holding a flickering lantern in one hand and a torn city map in the other. "We can't last in here," he said, voice firm but raw. "Supplies are almost gone. Medical kits, ammo, even food, were running dry." Harris added grimly, "And if that big one finds a weak spot, we'll be dead before morning." Nadia stepped forward, holding a hand-drawn escape route. "There's a bus depot 5 blocks west. If we can hotwire a bus, we can load everyone up and break out before the next wave." Melissa nodded. "We can't just sit here and wait to die." A murmur ran through the group, relief and fear, tangled together. Bryce looked around. "We'll need volunteers. Fast, quiet, capable." Nadia volunteered first, followed by Kyle, Camila, and Harris. Bryce hesitated, then looked at Camila. "You sure?" She nodded, firm. "I'm not staying behind while others risk everything. I can handle myself." Bryce turned to the group. "We move at dawn. Get what rest you can." The next morning. The door creaked open slowly. Fog clung to the streets, muffling the world. The group moved like shadows, Nadia leading, Harris covering the rear, Kyle scanning windows with a rifle, and Camila keeping low and alert. For several blocks, they saw no movement. No growls. No footsteps. Then they spotted it. The tall one, standing completely still in the center of the road, head tilted as if listening. The group dropped to the ground. "It's like it's tracking something," Kyle whispered. Nadia hissed, "Don't move. Don't even breathe loud." A full minute passed. Then, the tall zombie suddenly turned and walked down an alley. Gone. They exhaled, barely. At the depot, the group split up. Nadia and Kyle searched the parking lot. Dozens of buses sat in various stages of decay, most vandalized, burned, or missing wheels. But tucked behind a shattered fence, Camila spotted something, a service bus, intact, the keys dangling from the ignition. She waved them over. "This is it. It's old but it might still work." Harris climbed in and checked the fuel gauge. "Half a tank. It'll get us out of the city." Nadia popped open the hood. "Battery's good. We're lucky. Too lucky." Kyle suddenly raised his weapon. "We've got movement." From the side entrance, zombies poured into the lot, at least 20 of them. But they didn't run. They stalked, like predators closing in on prey. And in the middle of them, the tall one. It pointed again, and the others split into 2 flanks. "They're flanking us," Nadia shouted. "They're hunting us like a pack. Get in the bus, now!" Harris roared. Camila climbed in first, yanking the doors open from inside. The others scrambled in after her. Harris slammed the door shut just as the first zombie clawed at the glass. "Drive!" Kyle shouted. Nadia twisted the key. The engine groaned, once, twice. Then roared to life. She gunned the accelerator, tires screeching, as the bus smashed through a gate and sped down the road. Behind them, the tall zombie watched, unmoving. Back at the gymnasium, the survivors heard the rumble of an engine. They rushed to the barricaded windows, pressing against the glass. "Is it them?" "It's them, it's a bus." Bryce kicked the barricades free just as the vehicle skidded to a stop. The doors hissed open, and Camila jumped out, waving. "We got one. Everyone get in." No one waited. People poured out in waves, grabbing children, supporting the injured, carrying bags of essentials. Melissa helped Derek's son into the vehicle. Harris lifted an old man into the back row. Kyle checked the rooftops as zombies began appearing at the far end of the street. "Move, move, move." The last survivors scrambled in. Bryce was the final one aboard. He jumped inside, slammed the door, and shouted, "Go!" Nadia floored the gas pedal. The bus tore through the city's ruins, the tall zombie shrinking in the distance behind them. But even as they left the siege behind, Bryce couldn't shake the feeling that the creature had let them go. Like it was playing a longer game. The bus sped through the shattered city. Broken cars lined the streets like skeletons. Burnt-out buildings slumped inward. Every alley whispered with the threat of movement. Yet for a time, there was only silence. Inside the bus, the survivors were eerily quiet. Children clung to parents. Injured adults leaned against windows, eyes glazed with exhaustion and trauma. Bryce walked the aisle, checking on everyone, making sure no one was missing. 47 souls, Harris murmured, sitting near the back, shotgun on his lap. Out of 60. 13 didn't make it. Melissa sat near Camila and the baby. The infant had finally fallen asleep, nestled in a towel. "If we're lucky," Melissa said softly, "this is the worst behind us." But Bryce didn't believe in luck anymore. Nadia drove, focused and tense, eyes darting from mirrors to dashboard. The map in her lap was hand-marked, a possible military checkpoint on the outskirts of the city. A red circle marked the location, an old base-turned-emergency aid center, according to an old broadcast. "We head west, through the industrial sector," she said. "If the roads are clear, we're there in 2 hours." "Big if," Bryce muttered. They were 15 minutes into the drive when the ambush hit. A collapsed tunnel forced them onto a detour. As they rolled through a deserted overpass, Kyle, scanning from the rooftop hatch, spotted movement. Too late. Zombies poured from the buildings, crashing into the road behind them. A steel garbage truck blocked their path ahead, parked diagonally across both lanes. Nadia slammed the brakes. The bus skidded. A dozen zombies leapt onto the hood. Another tore at the door. One managed to crawl through the roof hatch, landing inside with a snarling scream. Chaos exploded. Harris fired a shotgun, blowing the zombie backward. Kyle slammed the hatch shut. Screams echoed as more zombies swarmed the vehicle, banging and clawing, denting the metal. Bryce grabbed the emergency axe. "We clear that truck or we die right here." Nadia threw the gear into reverse, backing up just enough to give the bus a run-up. Kyle and Harris climbed onto the front, latching ropes to the grill. "Hold on!" Harris yelled. Nadia hit the gas. Boom! The bus rammed the garbage truck with a violent jolt. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered. But the truck budged, just enough. A narrow path opened. Nadia punched the accelerator again, and the bus tore through, leaving the horde behind. An hour later, the city began to thin. Green returned. Cracked highways gave way to fields and hills. The air smelled less of death, more of earth and wind. Relief began to settle over the group. Camila sat by the window, smiling softly. "We made it." Melissa leaned against her, eyes closed. "We just might have a chance." But up front, Bryce and Nadia weren't smiling. The map showed the checkpoint was near, a final stretch of winding road through an abandoned industrial park. As they approached the edge of it, Kyle looked through binoculars. "Guys," he said. "We've got a problem." Ahead, the road was lined with blackened vehicles. Banners flapped in the wind, red flags with white XS, strange symbols. Warning signs. Smoke rose in thin spirals from a massive crater in the center of the road. And at the far end, a wall. Makeshift. Spiked. Armed men patrolled it with rifles and flamethrowers. Not military. Something else. Bryce looked through the glass. "That's not a rescue camp." Nadia frowned. "It's a private zone. Heavily armed. They've taken over the checkpoint. And they're not welcoming visitors," Harris added. They stopped the bus a safe distance away. Bryce and Harris moved to scout the perimeter. From a distance, they watched the sentries pace. One of them stopped, pointing toward their direction. Bryce swore. "They've seen us." Before they could react, a voice crackled through a megaphone from the wall. "Turn around. This area is claimed. Unauthorized vehicles will be fired upon." "Great," Harris muttered. "First zombies. Now warlords." As they returned to the bus, Bryce shook his head. "They've locked down the only viable exit. That was our road out. Our hope." Nadia closed her eyes. "So what now?" Bryce looked out at the sunset. The sky was blood red. "We find another way. There has to be something else. Somewhere safe." But as night fell again, and they turned the bus toward an unmarked dirt road, none of them saw the shadow watching from the trees. The tall zombie had followed. It always did. The wheels of the bus rumbled across the uneven dirt road, bumping and jerking with every turn. Darkness had fallen completely now. The headlights pierced only a few feet ahead, revealing twisted trees and crumbling ruins along a forested stretch once known as the outskirts of Brookvale. Now, it was abandoned, forgotten. Inside the bus, people huddled together. The mood had shifted again. From relief, to fear, and now, uncertainty. "Where are we even going?" Melissa asked, clutching her coat tighter. "This isn't on any map." "No, but it's better than turning back toward that private militia," Bryce replied, standing beside Nadia at the front. "We don't need a bullet in our backs." "There has to be somewhere safe," Nadia whispered. "Even just a shelter, a cabin, anything." Camila tapped on the fogged glass. "There's something up ahead, lights." Everyone looked. Faint, flickering glows peeked through the trees. Fires. Torches maybe. Dozens of them. As the bus crept closer, the outline of buildings emerged from the shadows. An old summer camp, rotting cabins, broken signposts, rusted playgrounds. But the firelight came from the center, where a circle of people sat around a bonfire. Bryce squinted. "Are they alive?" Kyle peered through his rifle scope. "They're not infected. At least, they don't look like it." Nadia stopped the bus a safe distance away. Bryce, Kyle, and Harris stepped out, weapons ready. As they approached the group, one of the figures stood up, arms spread. "Travelers," he said warmly. "Come closer. You're safe here." Bryce hesitated. "Who are you?" "Survivors. Just like you. Call me Father Reed." The others around the fire murmured quietly, nodding, watching. "We saw your bus," Reed continued. "Thought you might join us. The road is full of death. But here, we hold the line. We live with the forest. We know its rhythms. We are untouched." Kyle muttered, "He's giving cult vibes." Bryce didn't disagree. But they needed rest. "Just for one night," Bryce said firmly. "Then we move on." Father Reed smiled. "Of course. All are welcome, for one night." The survivors gathered around the fire. Food was shared, simple, bland stew and boiled roots. Children laughed for the first time in days. People smiled again. Camila let the baby rest in her arms, and for a brief moment, it felt like life again. Reed stood before them as night deepened. "You all know the world has changed," he said softly. "But there are things older than this infection. Older than us." His voice lowered. "The undead aren't random. They are driven. Guided. By something ancient. Something we saw long ago, before the first cities fell." A few survivors exchanged worried glances. "Let me guess," Harris muttered, "this is where he tells us about some prophecy." Reed continued, eyes glowing in the firelight. "There is a being among them. Taller than the rest. Smarter. He walks with purpose. We call him the Shepherd." At that, Bryce stiffened. "You've seen him too?" Reed's face turned grim. "He's no longer just following. He's leading." Later that night, Bryce couldn't sleep. He stood near the treeline, watching. The others lay scattered around cabins and tents. A few of Reed's people still sat by the fire, unmoving. Too still. Bryce turned to head back. That's when he saw the symbol etched into the back of one of the cabins. A strange spiral with jagged lines extending from its center. Not graffiti. A mark. He touched it, and something flashed behind his eyes. A vision, brief, violent. Zombies bowing before the tall one. Sacrifice. Worship. His head spun. From behind, a whisper, "You saw it, didn't you?" Bryce turned. Reed stood behind him. "That symbol. It's not just a warning," Bryce said. "It's a beacon." Reed smiled. Not warmly this time. "We don't just survive here," he said softly. "We serve." Bryce's heart pounded. In the distance, from the woods. A howl. Not animal. Not human. A call. Dozens of silhouettes began to move from the trees, eyes glowing faintly. The shepherd had arrived. And he wasn't alone. The night had never felt darker. Bryce stared into the forest as the undead poured from the shadows, silent, organized, unlike anything they'd faced before. Their eyes glowed with a faint, eerie light, and at their center was him. The shepherd. 7 feet tall. Hollow eyes. Black veins crawled up his neck like vines. He walked slowly but with purpose, head turning toward the old summer camp as if following a scent, or an invitation. Reed stood near Bryce, arms raised. "He comes to claim what is his." "You brought him here," Bryce hissed. "You led him to us." Reed's voice was calm. "We summon him. We honor the one who controls death." Before Bryce could react, Reed blew into a bone-carved whistle, and his followers, once silent around the fire, stood in unison. Eyes blank. Unblinking. A few of them began to walk toward the approaching horde. Sacrifice. Back at the camp, Harris, Nadia, Kyle, and Melissa saw the incoming threat. "They're not just zombies," Nadia said. "They're following orders." "They're hunting," Harris corrected, loading his last shells. Kyle climbed onto the bus roof. "They'll be here in minutes. We've got to move, now." "No!" Bryce shouted, returning. "If we try to run, we'll be overrun on the road. The only chance we've got is to hold them here." Camila shielded the baby in her arms, whispering prayers. Melissa clutched her arm. "You think this is the end?" Bryce looked toward the shepherd. "No, this is the test." They set the trap quickly. Gasoline barrels, leftover propane, broken glass bottles, they turned the old camp into a fortress of fire. The bus was parked at the center, a last line of defense. Reed and his followers stood calmly at the edge of the clearing, whispering chants in a language none of them understood. "Get the kids inside the bus," Bryce ordered. "Everyone who can't fight, stay low." Harris and Kyle took sniper positions. Melissa and Nadia helped spike the perimeter with makeshift spears. Then the woods exploded. The undead charged, silent but furious. Not shambling like before, they sprinted. Climbing, tearing, leaping. They weren't just following hunger. They were following him. The shepherd stood behind them, watching as if studying. Judging. The first wave hit hard. Molotovs rained fire. Explosions tore holes in the earth. Screams filled the night. Zombies broke through on the left. Melissa stabbed one through the eye with a broken chair leg. Harris fired until his barrel glowed red. Still they came. The children cried. The baby screamed. Nadia took a bite to the shoulder but kept fighting. Reed walked calmly into the chaos, arms wide. Shepherd. Accept us. Accept. He never finished. The shepherd touched his forehead, and Reed dropped like a stone, his body shriveling, energy sucked dry. It wasn't worship. It was consumption. Even his own followers were not safe. Bryce faced the shepherd alone now. The others had fallen back, defending the bus with all they had. The shepherd stepped into the firelight, untouched by the flames. Up close, his face was ancient, part bone, part rotten flesh. But his eyes, they were aware. Bryce raised the axe. You're not a virus. You're not an accident. The shepherd tilted his head. You're a weapon, Bryce whispered. Someone made you. And somehow, he knew it was true. The shepherd reached for him. At the last second, boom. Harris drove the bus straight into him, crushing zombies along the path. The shepherd was thrown backward, body breaking trees as he crashed into the woods. Bryce didn't wait. He signaled the survivors. Now. We move. Dawn broke as the bus rumbled down the final hill. They had lost more. Out of 60, only 32 remained. Nadia, bloodied but breathing, drove them into a quiet valley, miles from the fire, from the cult, from the shepherd. Kyle scanned the tree line. We lost him? Maybe, Bryce said, staring out the back window. But not forever. The shepherd had vanished into the forest, wounded, but not dead. He would return. And next time, he would bring more. Epilogue. Weeks later. Somewhere in the Rockies. A hidden radio station crackled to life. A woman's voice came through. To any survivors out there, Camp Echo has room. Coordinates attached. Beware the tall one. He walks with the wind and commands the dead. Do not follow the fire. Stay in the shadows. Live another day. The signal repeated. Across a ruined world, someone listened. And the war for survival continued. End of Part 8, series complete.